When you think of a global superpower, you probably think of the United States. Its military is the most powerful on Earth, with a presence in dozens of countries. In 2025, its proposed military budget is a staggering $962 billion, which is more than the next 10 biggest spending countries combined. But here's the thing. For the first 150 years of its history, America's identity was built on the exact opposite idea: staying out of the world's problems. Its army was tiny, and its leaders were allergic to foreign adventures. So how did a nation that just wanted to be left alone end up running the world? The short answer is, by accident. A series of shocking global events forced a reluctant nation onto the world stage, changing the world forever. From the very beginning, America was designed to be different from the old, squabbling powers of Europe. The founding fathers had just fought a revolution to escape a global empire, and they wanted nothing to do with the constant wars and cynical politics of the old world. This wasn't just a casual preference, it was the entire philosophy of the new nation. In his 1796 farewell address, George Washington gave a stark warning, urging his countrymen to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. He argued that Europe's interests had nothing to do with America's. Getting tangled up would just drag the young country into conflicts that weren't its own. And for more than a century, America mostly listened. The vast Atlantic Ocean was a giant moat, a natural defense that let the nation focus on its own massive project, expanding westward, building industries, and just trying to hold the country together. This policy became known as isolationism. The goal was to create a fortress America, so self-sufficient and remote that it could simply ignore the chaos of the rest of the world. Sure, it traded with other nations, but it dodged political connections whenever possible. But in 1898, the first crack appeared in the fortress. A mysterious explosion sank the USS Maine in Havana Harbor, Cuba. Whipped into a frenzy by sensationalist newspapers, the US declared war on Spain. In a surprisingly quick war, the United States didn't just kick Spain out of Cuba. It suddenly found itself in charge of Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. All at once, America had an overseas empire it never asked for and didn't know what to do with. This sparked a fierce debate. Was this a betrayal of America's anti-imperialist roots? Or was it the nation's destiny to expand its influence? This was the first accident, a moment where an external event pulled America past its own shores, setting the stage for a much bigger struggle with its own identity. When World War I exploded across Europe in 1914, America's official response was immediate and predictable: absolute neutrality. President Woodrow Wilson declared the US must be neutral in fact, as well as in name. To most Americans, the war was the ultimate proof of the European madness Washington had warned about: a messy tangle of alliances and old grudges that had zero to do with them. One of the hit songs of the day was literally titled, "I Didn't Raise My Boy to Be a Soldier." For 3 years, Wilson walked this tightrope. The country was deeply divided, with millions of recent immigrants having family ties to both sides. While many Americans sympathized with Britain and France, there was no public appetite for war. In fact, Wilson won his 1916 re-election on the powerful slogan, "He kept us out of war." But here's the catch. While America was politically neutral, it wasn't economically neutral. US banks and factories were sending vast loans and enormous amounts of supplies to the Allies. Whether its citizens wanted to admit it or not, America's economic power was propping up the Allied war effort. Then came the shocks that made neutrality impossible. The first was Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare. Desperate to break the British naval blockade, German U-boats started sinking any ship heading to Britain, including civilian passenger liners. In May 1915, a U-boat torpedoed the British ship Lusitania, killing nearly 1,200 people, 128 of them Americans. The attack caused outrage in the US, and for the first time, public opinion began to seriously shift. By early 1917, Germany was getting desperate. It made a fateful gamble. It announced it would resume sinking all ships, including American ones, betting it could starve Britain into submission before the US could mobilize. It was a losing bet, and the final nail in the coffin of American neutrality came just weeks later. British intelligence intercepted and decoded a secret message from German Foreign Secretary Arthur Zimmermann to the German ambassador in Mexico. The proposal it contained was a bombshell. If the US entered the war, Germany would offer Mexico an alliance. If Mexico attacked the United States, Germany would help it recover its lost territories, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. The British quietly handed the Zimmermann telegram to President Wilson. On March 1st, it hit the front page of American newspapers, and the nation exploded in fury. This was no longer a distant European squabble. It was a direct plot against the American homeland. The combination of German U-boats and the Zimmermann telegram left Wilson with no choice. On April 2, 1917, he asked Congress to declare war, famously stating that the world must be made safe for democracy. America's entry was the turning point. The arrival of millions of fresh American troops and the full might of its industry tipped the scales, leading to an Allied victory in 1918. For the first time, America hadn't just participated in a world event. Its power had decided the outcome. It had been dragged, kicking and screaming, from the sidelines to the center of the world stage, and there was no going back. The story of America's rise is packed with these kinds of shocking twists and unintended consequences. If you want to understand more about the pivotal moments that shaped our modern world, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. After the horrors of World War I, America's first instinct was to slam the door on the world again. The war had been bloody and expensive, and the messy post-war peace talks just reinforced the old desire to go back to being left alone. The US Senate even rejected President Wilson's own creation, the League of Nations, because it feared the organization could entangle the country in future foreign wars. The 1920s were a deliberate attempt to put the genie of global power back in the bottle. But the world had changed, and so had America. It had emerged from the war as the planet's leading economic power. This financial might meant that global events now directly impacted American prosperity, whether politicians liked it or not. The Great Depression proved it. The economic collapse that began in 1929 wasn't just an American crisis, it was a global one. It proved that Fortress America was a fantasy. In a connected world, America's problems were the world's problems. And as America looked inward, new, far more dangerous threats were rising. In Europe, Adolf Hitler and the Nazis took power. In Asia, Imperial Japan launched a brutal campaign of expansion. These weren't just traditional empires squabbling. They were aggressive ideologies that wanted to tear down the world order. Still, the isolationist feeling in America was incredibly strong. Scarred by WWII, many were determined to avoid another foreign war at all costs. Groups like the America First Committee argued passionately to stay out of it. But just like before, a series of external shocks forced America's hand. The relentless aggression of Germany and Japan made it clear these regimes wouldn't stop on their own. President Franklin D. Roosevelt began to slowly pivot the country from strict neutrality to a state of preparedness, sending aid to Britain as it stood alone against Hitler. Then came the final, catastrophic accident that shattered American isolationism for good. On a quiet Sunday morning, December 7, 1941, the Japanese military launched a surprise attack on the US naval base at Pearl Harbor. It was a national trauma, an even bigger shock than the Zimmermann telegram. In a single morning, the debate was over. The oceans couldn't protect America anymore. The isolationist dream was dead. America's entry into World War II wasn't just as another soldier in the fight. It became, in Roosevelt's words, the arsenal of democracy, its factories churning out an unbelievable number of planes, tanks, and ships. By the war's end, its cities were untouched, its economy was booming, and it was the only country in the world with the atomic bomb. The old powers of Europe lay in ruins. America stood alone as a true global superpower. America's journey to becoming a superpower wasn't a grand plan. It wasn't born from a desire for conquest. It was a series of reluctant reactions, the story of a nation that clung to an ideal of being separate from the world, but was repeatedly and violently pulled into global affairs by events it couldn't control. The Spanish-American War was an accidental stumble into having an empire. The sinking of the Lusitania and the Zimmermann telegram were the shocks that dragged a neutral nation into World War I, and Pearl Harbor was the final, brutal shove that thrust upon it the mantle of global leadership. The nation George Washington had imagined a country safely separated from the world's troubles was gone forever, replaced by one whose decisions now shaped the fate of the entire planet. The great question for the 21st century remains: Can a nation that became a superpower by accident learn to wield that power with purpose? And what happens if it decides it no longer wants to?